You know yourself. You've read the books, listened to the podcasts, perhaps even sat through hours of therapy. You can articulate your childhood wounds, trace your emotional patterns, and name your triggers like a seasoned psychologist. And yet, your life remains stubbornly unchanged. Why? Because understanding your pain is not the same as being free from it. There's a quiet illusion that many intelligent, introspective people fall into. The belief that awareness is enough. That by mapping out the terrain of your inner world, you've already crossed it. But the map is not the territory. You may have drawn it in exquisite detail, but walking through it is another matter entirely. This confusion between insight and transformation is not a minor error. It's a form of self-deception, subtle, sophisticated, and deadly. It allows us to feel superior, as if we're progressing, when in reality, we're standing still. Worse, it allows us to talk about growth while avoiding the actual discomfort of change. St. Thomas Aquinas, the great realist philosopher, made a critical distinction. Knowledge belongs to the intellect, but virtue belongs to the will. You can know the good and still not choose it. You can see your flaw with perfect clarity and still repeat it, endlessly. Why? Because nothing has yet touched the core of your moral will. There is a hidden comfort in mere reflection. It makes us feel safe. We feel in process, and that eases the pain of not changing. But this comfort is false. Real growth is not contemplative, it is confrontational. It demands that we move, act, risk, and often fail. So let me ask you, what have you understood about yourself that hasn't changed your daily behavior one bit? Where has your insight become an excuse for inertia? This is not to dismiss reflection. It is essential. But when it becomes a substitute for action, it turns into a spiritual cul-de-sac. The very clarity that should empower you becomes the mirror that paralyzes you. Pause here. Consider this. Are you living your insight or merely admiring it? If this speaks to you, comment below. I know, but I haven't moved. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who might need a gentle, honest confrontation with themselves. Some of the most emotionally stuck people are the most articulate. They can explain in depth why they behave as they do. They can trace their fears back to childhood events, dissect their emotional defenses, and speak eloquently about their inner world. But ask them what they've actually changed, and the answer is often silence. There's a hidden danger in becoming too clever about yourself. Philosophical reflection, when authentic, leads us toward deeper commitment to truth and goodness. But when distorted, it becomes a refuge, a sophisticated form of avoidance. We analyze instead of act. We deconstruct our wounds instead of healing through choice. We debate values instead of embodying them. Thought becomes a substitute for moral courage. Dostoevsky once wrote that the more conscious a man becomes, the more deeply he suffers. But he never said that consciousness alone saves anyone. It only opens the door. You still have to walk through it. And that step, the step of action, is where many turn back. In clinical experience, I've seen it time and again. The person who knows too much and does too little. They are frozen in what might be called existential overanalysis. It feels like growth, but it's really fear dressed in intellectual robes. Because acting means risk. It means disappointing others. It means giving up the comfort of identity built around brokenness. Above all, it means leaving the safety of theory and entering the battlefield of daily moral struggle. Philosopher Julian Marias warned against the temptation of abstraction. He insisted that life is not lived in ideas, but in choices. And choice, by nature, is concrete, messy, and real. Overthinking is a way of avoiding the dirt under our fingernails, the cost of becoming someone new. So here is the hard question. Where are you using thinking to avoid deciding? Do you reflect as a path to integrity or as a shield against commitment? Real change doesn't come from better arguments. It comes from small, often uncomfortable acts of will. You won't think your way into maturity. You'll choose your way there, sometimes blindly, often afraid, always imperfectly. Let this reflection sit with you in silence, not to analyze, but to stir a decision. One of the most paralyzing beliefs we inherit is this: I need to feel ready before I act. It sounds reasonable. After all, who wants to move forward in fear or act without clarity? But this expectation, that motivation, certainty, or emotional peace must precede meaningful change, is precisely what keeps many lives stagnant. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. You will rarely feel ready to do what matters most. Maturity is doing what's right even when you don't feel like it, even when fear is loud, even when your heart is cloudy, even when your body begs for comfort. In fact, those are often the very moments when character is formed, not in ease, but in resistance. Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics, defined virtue not as a feeling, but as a habit. And habits begin in repetition, not inspiration. The just man becomes just by doing just acts. The brave by doing brave acts. Not once, not when it feels good, but consistently, especially when it costs. We often confuse emotions with truth. If I feel uncertain, I must be unprepared. If I'm afraid, it must be a warning. But emotions, though real, are not always reliable guides. They reflect many things: wounds, habits, beliefs, and not always reality itself. Waiting for emotional clarity before taking moral action is like waiting for the ocean to be still before learning to swim. You'll be stuck on the shore forever, imagining movement, but never entering the water. In the clinical setting, many breakthroughs happen after the action is taken, not before. Courage, for example, is rarely felt in advance. It appears in the doing, in the shaky voice that still speaks, the trembling hands that still build, the heavy legs that still move forward. So here is the challenge. What have you postponed, waiting for a feeling that may never come? What small act of courage, kindness, or responsibility could you do today, precisely because it's hard? Don't wait for motivation. Let duty lead. Let the act come first, and the feeling follow, if it does at all. This is not about forcing yourself blindly. It's about trusting that your value system is more stable than your emotional weather, and learning, slowly, to live by it. There's a hidden fantasy that many carry about transformation. The idea that when it finally happens, it will be dramatic. That change will come with fire, clarity, a sudden breakthrough. That one day we'll wake up different, finally free from the weight we've been dragging. But the truth is far less glamorous. Real change is mundane, awkward, quiet, often humiliating. It happens not in grand decisions, but in the dull friction of everyday life, when you resist the urge to justify a bad habit, when you choose restraint in a moment of anger, when you show up on time for something that matters, over and over, especially when no one sees. Transformation is not a cinematic event. It's more like cleaning a floor that keeps getting dirty. You sweep again and again. Not because it's fun, not because it feels meaningful in the moment, but because it's the right thing to do. Tolstoy captured this beautifully in Anna Karenina, where the character of Levin, after endless moral struggle, realizes that goodness isn't found in emotional highs, but in the unremarkable labor of daily fidelity, to work, to family, to truth. It's not heroic, it's responsible, but that's precisely why it's so rare. Most people want inspiration, not discipline. They want novelty, not routine. Yet it is routine, and especially moral routine, one that reshapes the soul. In the clinic, I've watched people break deep cycles not through insight alone, but through persistence. A woman rebuilding trust after betrayal, who shows up to hard conversations every week. A man facing addiction who wakes early to walk, breathe, and pray, not because he feels strong, but because he knows who he wants to become. You won't feel transformed in the process. Often, you'll feel worse. Why? Because you're not acting from your automatic self anymore, you're confronting it. And that confrontation is exhausting. But that's the price of change. Not lightning bolts, but long obedience in the same direction, as Nietzsche once put it. So ask yourself, am I willing to be bored, uncomfortable, unseen, for the sake of becoming someone better? If not, then maybe what you're craving isn't growth. Maybe it's just another emotional thrill. But if you are, then begin. Quietly. Today. You already know what needs to change. That's not the issue. You've had the conversations, done the journaling, perhaps even sought guidance. The path is visible. The steps are clear. And yet, you don't walk them. Why? Because change is not about clarity. It's about suffering, the kind you'd rather avoid. What keeps most people trapped is not ignorance, but their threshold for pain. Not physical pain, moral pain. The ache of frustration. The sting of rejection. The slow burn of shame. These are the thresholds where character is forged or abandoned. You can't live a new life without first learning to stay still inside your discomfort. This is one of the great insights of Viktor Frankl. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. But most of us don't get that far. We resist the discomfort so fiercely that we numb ourselves before meaning can emerge. It's not the anger that ruins us. It's our refusal to sit with the shame beneath it. Not the loneliness, but the frantic attempts to escape it. We medicate, distract, justify, run. And so the old pattern survives, unchallenged. But what if the very feeling you avoid is the door to your freedom? Think of the seed that must crack to grow, the skin that must burn to heal, the silence that must be endured before peace can settle in. All true transformation requires a descent into what we fear, into what we've buried, into what still hurts. And yes, it's uncomfortable, sometimes unbearably so. But every moral virtue, patience, courage, humility, is born in that space. The space where you don't get immediate relief, where no one applauds, where you learn to carry the weight instead of dropping it. So ask yourself honestly, what kind of suffering do you refuse to endure? And what is it costing you? Is your need for comfort sabotaging your character? Until you learn to suffer well, you will relapse into the same behaviors. Not because you don't know better, but because you haven't developed the inner strength to bear the discomfort of being better. And that strength isn't given. It's built, slowly, painfully, and with deep intention. You've heard it before and maybe even said it yourself. I'm just being true to who I am. It sounds noble, honest, free. But what if your idea of authenticity is actually keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be? Because not every impulse is worth following. Not every emotion deserves your loyalty. The modern cult of authenticity often reduces the self to a snapshot, as if who you are today is the final word on your identity. But the self is not static. It is meant to evolve. And sometimes evolving means betraying your current self for the sake of your future one. St. Augustine once confessed, "I was in love with my own ruin." There's a kind of self-loyalty that feels sincere, but is actually a form of self-sabotage. It's not authenticity, it's inertia disguised as virtue. To mature, you must outgrow certain versions of yourself. The angry self, the avoidant self, the self that clings to pride, or pleasure, or comfort. And that process isn't elegant. It often feels like a betrayal, not of truth, but of familiar dysfunctions. Real authenticity is not about obeying your every feeling. It's about aligning your life with what is good, even when it contradicts what you want in the moment. This is where classical philosophy offers a deeper compass. For Aristotle, the true self is not who you are by instinct, but who you are when you live in accordance with virtue. The self is formed not by expression, but by aspiration. You are what you strive toward. So when you say, "This is just how I am," stop and ask, is this version of me worthy of permanence? The idea that growth should feel natural is a lie. Often it feels like self-betrayal, like silencing an urge you've always obeyed, like walking away from a pattern that once protected you, like choosing discipline over spontaneity, not because it feels good, but because it is good. Moral growth demands that you outgrow your inner child, your reactive adolescent, even your wounded adult. And no, it doesn't mean becoming fake. It means becoming whole, through the tension of wanting one thing and choosing another. True authenticity is not being loyal to your emotions. It's being loyal to your highest potential even when it hurts. We live in a time where sharing your pain is not only accepted, it's applauded. There are platforms, communities, and entire movements built around the value of speaking your truth. And yes, there is power in being seen. There is dignity in naming what once was hidden, but there is also danger. Because somewhere along the way we began to confuse expression with transformation, and they are not the same. Verbalizing your wounds can be a first step toward healing, but if that's where you stop, it can quickly become a trap, a performance, a mask that masquerades as self-awareness, while secretly feeding the ego's need for attention, identity, or validation. You don't heal just by talking. You heal by integrating what you've spoken into how you live. Carl Jung warned of this very illusion, the tendency to remain in the shadow, talking endlessly about it, instead of walking toward the light that demands responsibility. As he put it, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And here is the absurdity. We can become addicted to the pain we've learned to articulate. It becomes who we are. It defines our relationships, our social media presence, even our inner monologue. We keep narrating the wound while quietly avoiding the silence where true rebuilding begins. Because healing is not loud, it's not public. It's often silent, private, even boring. It happens in the moment you choose not to repeat an old behavior, not because you said it out loud, but because you changed something inside. It's when you disappoint the old self, not by exposing it, but by quietly replacing it with action. There is a dignity in silence that the modern world has almost forgotten. A sacred space where you suffer without broadcasting, grow without applause, and choose a new pattern without declaring it to anyone. So ask yourself, are you speaking to be free or to be seen? Has your story become a script that traps you? If so, the path forward may not be more words. It may be less. Fewer explanations, more responsibility, fewer declarations, more quiet resolve. Talk, yes, when it serves truth. But then, let the silence teach you what words never will. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. The promise of ease. Quick fixes for your mind. Shortcuts for your soul. Hacks for happiness. 10 steps to inner peace. 5 habits of highly successful people. 1 pill for your anxiety. Behind it all lies a quiet cultural belief. That effort is something to be avoided. But this belief is not neutral. It is corrosive. It turns moral struggle, the very engine of maturity, into something we feel entitled to skip. And when we internalize that mindset, we begin to resent the very process that could save us. There is a rebellion taking place inside many modern hearts, but it's not loud. It's passive. It looks like procrastination, emotional numbness, an endless search for the perfect moment, method, or mood. What it really is resistance to inner labor. We want transformation without pain, wisdom without discipline, character without sacrifice. But the great traditions of both philosophy and psychology speak with one voice on this. There is no depth without difficulty. There is no integrity without tension. There is no growth without the slow, often lonely climb against your own inertia. St. Thomas Aquinas insisted that virtue requires effort, not just once, but repeatedly. It's not earned by intention, but by action formed through habit. And habit by nature requires repetition, often in obscurity, often without reward. Viktor Frankl observed that human beings are not destroyed by suffering itself, but by suffering without meaning. What makes effort unbearable is not the effort, it's the belief that it shouldn't be there. That if it's hard, something must be wrong. But what if the hardness is the point? In the clinic, I've seen this silent rebellion manifest as despair, not because the path is impossible, but because the person has been taught that effort is unfair, that they deserve comfort, that the presence of struggle means failure. So they wait, they spiral, they turn back. But here's the truth. The person you want to become is on the other side of effort you haven't made yet. And that effort won't be seen. It won't feel heroic. It won't be glamorous. It will be daily, quiet, and it will change you. Not all at once, but deeply. What if your soul is not tired of trying, but tired of avoiding what actually works? Stop worshiping ease. Begin the work. Theory is important. Insight is valuable. But nothing changes until your will enters the equation. That's where this journey becomes real. Not in what you understand, but in what you practice. And the ancients knew this well. Aristotle taught that virtue is not something we are born with, nor something we simply choose once. It is something we build, brick by brick, through repetition. You don't become patient by contemplating patience. You become patient by practicing it, especially when it costs you. So here is a simple yet powerful invitation. Make a weekly pact with yourself. Choose one virtue, just one, and let that be your compass for the next 7 days. For example, if you choose courage, then your task is this. Each day, do one thing that fear has kept you from doing. Call someone you've been avoiding. Speak a truth that needs to be said. Step into discomfort on purpose. If you choose generosity, then act against your instinct to preserve. Give your time, your attention, your presence, even when you're tired, even when it's inconvenient. If you choose temperance, then set limits where indulgence has ruled you. Turn off the screen earlier. Resist the extra drink. Pause before reacting. Let your appetite feel its limits and discover your strength. Whatever the virtue, let it govern your small, ordinary choices. Not because you feel inspired, but because you've made a pact. This is how character is built, not in moments of intensity, but in quiet fidelity to a higher aim. And write it down, not for performance, but for accountability. A single line each night. Today I practiced courage by, or I failed to be patient when. This isn't about guilt, it's about visibility. You can't grow what you refuse to face. This weekly rhythm transforms abstract ideals into moral muscle. It turns you from a thinker into a doer, slowly, imperfectly, but unmistakably. Because in the end, your life is not measured by what you admire, but by what you become. And becoming requires movement. So don't wait for a breakthrough. Don't wait to feel different. Choose your virtue, make your pact, and begin. 1 week at a time. One action at a time. That's how the soul is reshaped. You've gone deep. You've asked the hard questions. You've studied your pain, examined your patterns, reflected on your wounds. In many ways, you've already done more inner work than most ever will. And yet, your life still feels stuck, dry, unchanged. Why? Because knowing where the water used to be isn't the same as drinking from it. Imagine a well. Once it was full, a source of life, clarity, renewal. Now it's empty, but step close and you'll still catch the scent of moisture, a ghost of what was, a memory of depth. That's what self-knowledge without action becomes, a dry well that smells like water. It gives the illusion of depth, but quenches nothing. This is where many sincere people get lost. They've done the inner excavation. They've uncovered truth. They've seen their shadow. But they haven't lowered the bucket. They haven't drawn the truth up into their actions, their habits, their relationships. The knowledge is there, but unused, it stagnates. Frankl warned that meaning is never given. It must be realized. And realization demands commitment. Not reflection alone, not catharsis, but choice. Consistent, often uncelebrated moral choice. And here is the paradox. You can live near the truth, admire it, even speak it fluently, and still remain parched. What's missing is not more insight, it's integration. So let's return to the metaphor. The well is you, your potential, your wisdom, your hunger for something real. And if the waters have dried up, it's not because you haven't looked within. It's because you've stopped drawing the truth into action. The remedy isn't more searching. It's more living. Pick up the bucket. Reclaim the forgotten rituals of virtue. Let your days be marked by small, unremarkable acts of fidelity to your highest values. That's how the water returns. Not suddenly, but steadily. And over time, something shifts. The ground softens. The well refills. And life, true, integrated, meaningful life, flows again. So ask yourself, am I living like a dry well, full of knowledge but empty of motion? If so, let this be your turning point. If this journey stirred something in you, share in the comments. It's time to draw the water. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and pass it on to someone whose well needs filling. Your action might just inspire theirs.